Good afternoon, actually it's almost good late afternoon, so we begin our second session. Please take your seat. Desired to start at 5 sharp, of course, vanished. So we're being late with beginning. We'll try to end close to schedule that is there. So I'm Irena Vaishvilaitė, professor at Vilnius University with some diplomatic experience and some political as well. And I will be moderating this session that mostly, actually and overall, will focus on memories, as the first session ended with questions about memories, conflicting memories, controlled memories, personal memories, memory as the issue of very big disagreement. And so I would ask panel, the second panel, to take place, and I hope first our guest, Svetlana Alexeyevich, is here, because I saw her in corridor. Yeah, so please, пожалуйста, госпожа Алексеевич, займите место, где вы чувствуете себя удобно. Then I would call įveikos, writer, Lithuanian writer, quite well known in Lithuania for many books. He writes on history a lot. And I'm very happy to invite Timothy Rybak, specialist also on memory and memorization, author of many publications. And our last but not least, Lucas Veltz, who works with healing memories. If you don't mind, yeah, I would say this in for myself. Yeah, so we have a panel, we have, yes please, if somebody needs lectern, it's still here. And so we begin, and with your permission, I will moderate in 3 languages, speaking in Russian to Nobel Prize laureate Svetlana Alexeyevich, in Lithuanian to Herkus Kunčius, and they will speak exactly in those languages, and then I will pass to English to the second half of our panel. So let's begin. Госпожа Алексеевич, я понимаю, вы уже отвечали за короткое время вашего пребывания в Литве на очень многие вопросы. Но вы здесь, поскольку это конференция здесь происходит. И как раз ваши книги, они все посвящены памяти. Памяти людей, которые этой памятью не делились, как правило. То есть вы являетесь как бы мостом, вы являетесь голосом во многих случаях. И ваши книги действительно нелегко читать, потому что это память, которая болит, точно так же, как видимо, она болит и болела для этих людей. Прежде всего, я думаю у войны не женское лицо. Очень, очень болезненная книга, очень... Но и другие точно так же. Так вот, я хотела вас спросить просто для представления, о чем ваши книги? То есть это освобождение памяти, которая есть, но не была. Это правда, это страдание, это боль, которая не имела права существовать. Или еще что-то другое. Я думаю, что действительно было бы очень, очень важно в этом контексте услышать ваш человеческий голос, голос одного человека.
Хороший вопрос. Я на него пытаюсь всю жизнь ответить, зачем я пишу. Я думаю, начала я с книги «У войны не женское лицо», и это был интерес вот к войне, о которой все молчат. Так получилось, что я, будучи журналистом, встречалась с этими женщинами, и они говорили о том, о чем не говорили мужчины. А потом так нечаянно я оказалась, что вот недавно я знала эту женщину, потом мне сказали, что она умерла, ее нет. И я подумала о том, что от этого может совершенно исчезнуть. И исчезает, так как и рассказы моей бабушки украинской, которая рассказывала о войне потрясающие вещи. И вот этот песок истории, вот эти простые люди, они всегда только пейзаж, только контур истории. И мне подумалось, что сегодня, когда так другая скорость нашей жизни, литература тоже должна искать новые формы. И что если сделать роман из голосов этих людей? Вот сотни голосов людей. Ну, конечно, мне надо уловить женское лицо. Я расспросила около 1000 людей, даже больше, наверное. Потому что не каждого можно взять книгу. Многих людей просто несет ее потоком или таким толпизмом массовым, и они не продумывают свою жизнь. А мне нужен человек потрясенный, человек продуманный свою жизнь, человек, с кем я могу начать диалог, и мы можем оба что-то доставать из друг друга, чтобы понять, как соседи во времени, понять, где мы живем и зачем все это. И вот так родились мои романы, а потом я как-то эта идея выросла в большую идею. Стало ясно, что вот этот уникальный проект русского коммунизма, он никогда уже больше не повторится. Что это действительно около 100 лет нашей истории, и мне осталось только идти по таким узловым моментам этой истории, и я это прошла от начала до конца. Я еще застала людей, и там книжки есть, которые видели Ленина, и дошла до обломков, в общем-то, когда эта вся империя огромная разрушилась, когда осталась только огромная братская могила, море крови, и мы пришли вот к Путину, к тому, что мы есть сейчас. И я думаю, что для того, чтобы рассказы этих людей стали не просто, ну так, подумай, что взял всякий экзистенциальный хлам, притащил его на бумагу, это есть литература. Нет. Из этого надо как-то сконструировать эту прозу. Не то, чтобы придумать, но как-то сделать конструкцию, сделать то, чтобы вот быт стал бытием, показать, как уходит из человека жизнь, как легко он убивает друг друга. Почему эти суеверия, среди которых мы живем, так легко владеют нами. И мы во имя этого можем и свою жизнь отдать, и жизнь другого. Это была интересная работа в том плане, да, книги тяжело читать, но интересная работа была в том плане, что я обдумывала жизнь, я встречала интересных людей. Мы говорили о тех вещах, о которых мне интересно самой. Зачем все это? И почему это происходит? Почему, например, люди на войне не сходят с ума? На совести вот обычного солдата около 200 жизней в среднем. И он живет, и он рожает детей, и он любит детей. Почему он справляется, и как справляется психика? И вообще, почему человек так далеко ушел от божественного замысла, а превратился в какого-то социоробота, как это владеет человеческим умом и почему. То есть, мне было интересно жить.
Спасибо. Надеюсь, у нас будет время все-таки тоже и обменяться мнениями и вопросами между участниками панеля. В панели другой писатель и другое поколение слегка. И я И тогда перехожу на литовский. Jarkus Kučius rašo labai daug apie istoriją. Dauguma jo romanų yra istoriniai romanai, bet jis rašo apie tą kietą istoriją. Ne iš vieno žmogaus perspektyvos. Arba jeigu tai iš kažkokio žmogaus perspektyvos, tai iš žmogaus, kuris mato tikriausiai istoriją kaip įrankį, žmonės jam dažnai nesvarbu. Tai yra ta istorija, Jarkus rašo apie tai, kas sukūrė tas traumas ir tas kančias ir tuos praradimus, apie kuriuos mes čia kalbame. Tai tokiu būdu, kaip, gal irgi tas pasklausimas, apie ką iš tikrųjų, čia mano požiūris yra iš šalies, Jarko, bet apie ką tavo knygos ir gal kodėl jos tokios?
Ačiū. Gal pradėsiu nuo asmeninės patirties, nes savo pasidariau tokią išvadą, kad reikia rašyti apie tai, ką tu išmanai, arba ką galėtum išmanyti. Tai pradėkim nuo 1900, čia bus mano kalba iš kelių segmentų sudėliota. Pradėkim nuo 1978 metų, kada prasidėjo sovietų invazija į Afganistaną. Jau tuo metu, būdamas 14 metų paauglys, tėvų patartas, ruošiausi, kaip nepatekti į sovietų kariuomenę. Pirmoji medicininė komisija, kada komisariate turėjo būti atlikta, pasakiau, kad skauda galva ir paguldė mane Kaune į Raudonojo kryžiaus neurologinį skyrių. Atsidūręs tenai, šiame skyriuje gavau patarimų iš medikų, kad geriausias būdas išsisukti iš sovietų kariuomenės tai yra, kada tau atliks funkciją į stuburą. Taip gana pavojinga procedūra, kada tave sulenkia ir į slankstelius kala adatą ir tuo metu išmatuoja kraujo spaudimą tavo į smegenis. Mediko patartas atlikau taip, kaip turi būti. Sakė, aparatas yra kvailas, žmogus protingas, tai reikėjo įtempti pilvo raumenis ir parodė labai didelį spaudimą. Medikai pamatė tą išvadą ir komisariate labai nustebo ir garantavo, kad į sovietų kariuomenę neisiu. Deja, persikėlus į Vilnių, dokumentai mano medicininė kortelė buvo pamesta ir vėl teko viską daryti iš naujo. Taigi, jau 83 metais, kada įstojau į Dailės institutą ir kada Sovietų Sąjungoje pritrūko patrankų mėsos, pradėjau iš aukštųjų mokyklų, kur nėra karinės katedros, imti studentus po pirmojo kurso. Mokantis Dailės institute, čia noriu pasakyti, kad mano mokytoja buvo Irena Vaišilaitė, nereikėjo daug padėti pastangų, kad atsidurtum psichiatrinėje ligoninėje. Tad atsidūriau Vasaros gatvėje, kur galima buvo simuliuoti tam tikrą lengvą pamišimą. Psichiatrija tuo metu Lietuvoje buvo gan savotiška ir tuo metu visoje Sovietų Sąjungoje, nes skyriuje už menkiausius prasižengimus buvo baudžiama aminazinu, o tai reiškia, kad po 2 ar po 3 savaičių aminazino kurso tu tampi 20 kg sunkesnis ir sunkiai bepajudantis ir abojus. Mano diagnozė buvo tokia sausau. Žodžiu, bet kuriuo atveju man neužteko to pamišimo ir į Sovietų Sąjungos armiją aš išėjau, atlikus tokį titanišką darbą. Dabar apie tam tikras traumas. Dalinys, kuriame aš buvau, buvo savotiškas, nes vykdavo rotacija, atvykdavo karininkai iš Afganistano ir, švelniai tariant, gerokai pamišę ir traumuoti. Visa tai vyko kaip ir gan savotiškai, nes bet kuriuo atveju tave galėjo ar nušauti ar kaip, kol neatsitiko toksai įvykis, kad žvalgybos skyriaus karininkas iššaudė visą žvalgybos skyrių. Tai yra 5 savo kolegas, 5 karininkus. Įvykis tuo metu Sovietų Sąjungos kariuomeniai buvo išskirtinis ir atvyko inspektuoti šio įvykio generalinis Tarybų Sąjungos ginkluotųjų pajėgų inspektorius armijos generolas Ivašutinas. Ką tai reiškia žodis pareigos ir pavardė Ivašutinas? Ivašutinas prieš tai buvo GRU vadas, viena slapčiausių Tarybų Sąjungoje asmenybių. Man teko, likimas lėmė su juo susidurti, pasikalbėti ir net atiduoti pagarbą. Tuo metu buvau jefreitorius. Ir nuo to laiko man šis epizodas mano gyvenime labai stipriai užsifiksavo. Dabar antras segmentas. Turiu Maskvoje bičiulį memorialo mokslinį vadovą, istoriką Nikitą Petrovą, kuris užsiminėjo labai skausmingomis labai skausmingais istorijos epizodais. 91 metais jisai buvo žlugus pučui vienas svarbiausių slaptųjų archyvų perėmėjų. Na ir jis užsiminėjo Katinės reikalais ir pasakojo tokį epizodą, kaip norėjo parašyti knygą apie Katinę, nes svarbu už to, kokie žmonės už to buvo. Nes buvo vairuotojai, buvo tie, kurie konkrečiai šaudė, buvo didžiulė grupė žmonių. Deja, Putino laikais į archyvus jau ypač memorialo žmonės patekti negali. Todėl jis ėmėsi tokios detektyvinės veiklos, kad per gynybos ministeriją išrinko tos žmonės, kurie buvo apdovanoti. Ir tokiu būdu atsirado ta knyga, kuri vadinasi Nagraždinai za rastrėl, apdovanoti už sušaudymą. Taigi, Nikitos toksai pavyzdys mane pastumėjo pasidomėti ir domėtis tai žmonėmis, kurie vykdė represijas, kurie buvo tiesiogiai atsakingi už jas. Ir čia atsirado toksai dalykas, kad mes turime nemažai iš Lietuvos kilusių žmonių tiesiogiai atsakingų už represijas. Galima pavardinti tą patį Dzeržinskį, mano personažą Ježovą. Galima kalbėti, net irgi vertas knygos Jūsis, pirmasis Lenino apsauginis, vėliau Stalino apsauginis, kurį dar vėliau pakeitė Vlasikas. Galima kalbėti apie tokį Tūlą NKVD, vėliau KGB profesionalų žudiką Juozą Gurelevičių, pavadinkim, taip dabar gal tiesiai patikė. Žodžiu, tokių personažų atsirado labai daug. Bėda buvo ta, kada aš pasirinkau Ježovą, nes Ježovas yra kilęs iš Lietuvos, kilęs iš Veiverių, nors tiksliai nėra nustatyta. Jo biografija mane tiesiog suglumino. Kaip žmogus gimęs Lietuvoje 1895 metais, atvykęs į Peterburgą ir taip toliau keičia savo tapatybę, nes jis galėjo paeiti visai kitokiu keliu. Ir vėliau vykdo tas baises represijas, o laikotarpis taip ir vadinasi Ježovščina. Žodžiu, man buvo įdomu pačiam studijuojant žmogaus pats virsmas, kaip keičiantis epochomis žmogus gali tapti būdeliu ir pamiršti savo tapatybę, nors vėliau tardamas jisai prisipažino, kad mokė lietuviškai ir taip toliau. Ir per visą šitą laikotarpį nuo 95 iki 40 metų pereiti nuo Rusijos imperijos, raudonojo teroro, represijų ir kitų dalykų. Šalia to dar įdomu, kaip kito pačios savokos, kada buvo vykdomos represijos, jeigu prieš tai buvo tai vadinama klasiniai priešai, vėliau jie tapo liaudies priešais, nes galima buvo šiek tiek plačiau plėsti tos dalykus. Taigi man buvo įdomu rašyti apie tos neigiamus personažus, kurie prisidėjo prie šitų dalykų. Atsiprašau, kad per ilgai.
So we have two approaches to the personalities, where they speak themselves and when they actually are seen from outside, but with intent to understand, or at least to be amazed by what happens to to humans, but is also, some kind of understanding. Here I would like just to briefly stop passing to second part of the panel. From the first panel, what actually we saw from very interesting and very fundamental interventions, two concepts, two terms came out. It's politics of the memory, but actually it's concept of 19th century. And mostly of 19th century empires were forging their identity, multinational empires quite often, but not only, by policy of the memory. History is something that actually was created as modern history that we understand in 19th century. And now we have then, of course, there was policy of the memory as was introduced by Ambassador regarding Holocaust in time after Second World War, not immediately, and it looked, and now it's very interesting to look from some writings that are very recent, coming mostly from Russia, saying, well, there was a time when actually, even across the Iron Curtain, the states kind of did agree on politics of the memory. There was agreement. And now, it's really historian, it's also interesting when people jump into writing about politics of the memory, and I was very surprised to see actually a respectful researcher of 19th century of empire to become involved with recent situation and to actually come with conclusion that Eastern Europe and namely Poland and Baltic states destroyed that consensus on what history was about, beginning from 19th century, from 90s of 20th century. And actually there is thesis that provoked present Russia coming with revenge, with very aggressive policy of the memory. It would probably possible to call it asymmetrical, because none of those commentaries, thinking maybe about Polish Institute of the Memory or something, did anything similar that happens now in Russia on that. But of course, it was also very much provoked by a resolution of European Parliament of September 18. So that's one topic. When 19th century comes back with revenge, very interestingly, another thing that comes back with revenge equally interesting is geopolitics. As being in diplomatic service for a while, I remember very much that before 2014, geopolitics among diplomats was kind of fancy that is played by small groups, mostly marginal specialists or politologists. After 2014, it became reality also of diplomacy. Not all, of course, because it became reality of politics. So here, passing, from those personal histories, I'm very happy to give a floor to Timothy Timothy Rybak, who works with different forms of the memory and actually of institutionalized, is interesting, how memory becomes institutional, and what we want to remember, what we want to forget as societies. So please, the floor is yours. Please.
First of all, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, High Commissioner, I'm actually the director of the Historical Institute, but spent 10 years as the Deputy Secretary General of the Académie Diplomatique Internationale in Paris. So I've learned to kind of balance the ideal with the practical, or one might even say the pragmatic. I now find myself on a panel with artistic expression. And I actually would like to say that what were the examples I'm about to show, in some ways, the statues, the public monuments are really a reification of human trauma. and in some ways are the most visible expression of this historical trauma because they're in public spaces and we live with them every day. President Adam Cruz spoke earlier about this notion of these conflicting narratives. We just now heard about the politics of memory or even the politicization of memory. What I want you to know is that Lithuania is not alone. For the last 4 years, we have been tracking historical contestations in public spaces, and we've identified 140 current hotspots in the world that are currently taking place. I'm actually going to focus on 4 examples of positive outcomes and ways in which societies have dealt with these mass traumas. The first is the Holocaust in Germany. The second, Ambassador Dutriel had talked briefly about the role of slavery and the French confrontation with that. The third is this issue of the comfort women in Asia, and then finally Soviet legacies in Eastern Europe. But before beginning with positive solutions, I'd like to take us to an American college campus 4 years ago, and just would like 58 seconds of your attention. This is one of the elite American colleges in the South. These are the best and the brightest of Americans.
My God.
This is 3 years ago.
My God.
What they're responding to is a war that took place 150 years ago. And this continues to go on. A few days before that, a young woman was killed in Charlottesville, Virginia, over another conflict over statue. So the point is, our project was born out of an attempt to understand why these happen and what one can do to find practical solutions for resolving these types of conflicts. Because if they can happen, on a college campus in the United States of America, they do happen in 140 other places around the world. My first example is the Holocaust. Many of you know this is the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe on the Potsdamer Platz in Berlin. It was contested and controversial when it was built. It remains so. We could spend the rest of the day talking about it. I have personal opinions about how effective or not this is, but I'd actually like to focus on another German form of commemoration for the Holocaust, and that are these things called stumbling stones, Stolpersteine. This is right around the corner from my apartment in Berlin, where we live. There are, to date, 60,000 of these Stolpersteine across Europe. It has been called the largest public memorial in the world. The power of this type of commemoration, these are stones, cobblestones, which are put in front of the houses where Jewish families have lived. And the narratives are very simple. It says, here lives, there's Samuel Hines, the year he was born, when he was arrested, and then Sachsenhausen, where he was murdered. His wife, as you can see, was taken to Theresienstadt and then in Auschwitz. Their daughter was also died in Auschwitz. What one can do with this personalized view of the Holocaust, which is impossible in large memorials, that what you'll often see is that the child is in between both parents. Sometimes you'll see the dates when they were taken from the homes, and you'll see a family being picked apart day by day. Now, to my mind, the power of this is not only the individual experiences there, but the fact that it's woven into the fabric of daily life in Germany, in every German town, without it actually being imposed on it. You can look and study these stones if you want. You can ignore them if you feel your past has been left behind, but they exist and they are with you always. And I believe they will last as long as cobblestones, there are cobblestone streets in Germany. These Stolpersteine will be there. They're also scattered throughout Europe. This is probably one of the most famous Holocaust victims. This is, Anne Frank, with the famous diary. This is actually, there's a Stolperstein for her in the Netherlands. This is one with a family home in Frankfurt. With a little bit of searching, I also found these two stumbling stones here in Vilnius, which as you begin exploring this, and I believe these are the only two, but it may be one way of thinking about how to engage with and deal with these traumas. Yves Dutrieu just spoke earlier about the French confrontation at a national level, even embedded in law with the country of France. The city of Nantes, which he had put up there, was responsible for the transit of 800,000 slaves were moved from Africa to the Americas on ships that came out of Nantes. That's 800,000 out of the 12 million, so it is really one of the most significant transit points for slavery. For 200 years, there was silence on it. The mayor, very courageously, with some prodding from civil society, began to engage the issue of how do we deal with this legacy of slavery without it actually overwhelming or crushing us or alienating the majority of society. And frankly, I think the French have gotten it, not just because Mr. Dutrieu is in the room, but I really think the French have gotten this absolutely right with how to deal with a mass trauma. What they did was to, a bit like the German Stolpersteine, they took these glass bricks and they give you the name of the ship, l'amour, love. It was a slave ship, departed Nantes in 1785. The power that's contained in those, you can go into the museum to understand it, because this is the lower deck of one of those slave ships. So each of those glass bricks basically contains this narrative. Now what they've done is along 1.5 miles along the wharves where the ships used to depart, they've put the stones in there at these odd angles. So in some ways, when you look at it in the right light, it has a very artistic, almost magical effect. So you can actually walk along the harbor, walk along the Loire River, and just enjoy the evening sunset. But once again, you can look down and understand what you're looking at. Now comes the brilliant part to this memorial. What they've begun to do, this was put up, about 10 years ago or so it was installed. They've begun taking these bricks and creating them for those people who perished in the crossings across the Mediterranean Sea. Unknown, age unknown, age inconnu, found dead, and then the date of the death. And you'll see these planted throughout there. It's a way of saying the past is with us, but we also need to be thinking about the present. And I think it's a very powerful way of engaging past memory with the present, and also saying we are not alone in bearing the burden of this tragedy. This is a Comfort Women statue outside of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, and for all the diplomats in the room, you'll appreciate how effective and uncomfortable this statue is. The Comfort Women were the women, mainly Korean women, who were pressed into sexual slavery for the Japanese army during the Second World War. It was such an issue of shame that the women themselves did not want to talk about it. Society did not want to address it. But about 20 years ago, a group of Comfort Women used to come every Wednesday and stand in front of the Japanese embassy in silent protest, just as a reminder as to what happened. And after 1,000 weeks, they realized they were dying off and that they had better get a permanent presence there. They created this statue. There are now over 100 of them throughout Korea, dozens throughout Asia. There are even several in the United States as these physical reminders. And I think this is where the artistic element comes in. This is a brief narrative of it, but if you see, the hair is shorn, which shows this forcing into servitude. The woman is barefoot, and her feet are slightly raised to suggest the instability of what happened to these women afterwards. The fists are clenched. Most importantly, there's a chair next to it, an empty chair. And this is where to first of all represent the Comfort Women who are no longer there, but it also is an artistic invitation to come and sit there in a sense, put yourself in that person's place. And I think for an interactive way of engaging with a very painful, very complicated history, once again, without overwhelming things, but making it a presence in society, I don't think there's probably a more effective way of dealing with a trauma like that. Finally, yesterday we did go to the Grutas Park. I had to go see it because, as I said, we've done 140 of these cases around the world, and frankly, this had seemed to be one of the most effective ways of dealing with a mass legacy. I mean, keep in mind countries in Asia, in Africa, South Asia in particular, let's say with the British legacy, are left with all of these statues and monuments. And what does one do with this mass legacy? We're completely, not completely, but in most cases, against the notion of erasure and destruction. You need to find a way to contextualize, even relocate, but really the last resort should be destruction and erasure. And I wanted to go see Grutas Park myself to see if it lived up to the expectations. And it really was, it was very well done because you walk in and it presents you with the horror of what it is. It's this barbed wire fence with the tower. But then you go through all of these various locations, and the statues are presented, I say, in a respectful and a dignified way. There would be other ways of managing these parks, and there are other statue parks like this where it's either made to degrade or to take something which is tragic and make it humorous or absurd. I think the balance of this park is just right, and it does leave you, however, with occasions for selfies like this, where one can stand and see Stalin, who died, as we learned, was however many years ago, today. But as a way of, I think, capturing the legacy of a country that had lived in this system for as long as it did, without erasure, it's a nice way, an effective way of corralling the memory, not erasing it, but giving it a place where it can stand. In closing, I'd like to leave you with one final example, which, with all due respect to the High Commissioner, goes back to fascist Italy. In Mussolini, in the city of Bolzano, they had the finance ministry was this enormous fascist building with all of this iconography, which was fairly offensive to our taste. And the question is, what do you do with it? Do you destroy these friezes? Do you tear down the building? And what they did was to take a quote by Hannah Arendt and put it in her original, which was German, and then the local language as well, it's Italian, with this somewhat cryptic, but I think very effective phrasing, no one has the right to obey. And I think this has this whole, embodies this whole problematic of what is victimization, what is a perpetrator, what is the space between that. And the building itself, it allows that the structure to be retained in the significance and meaning of its iconography from the fascist days, and yet by this artistic intervention to completely redefine the meaning and to sort of force reflection. So I guess in closing, I would say that this is a panel which is looking at artistic memory and how we do this. Statues, these public spaces play a role. They are in some ways the most visible and visceral of those legacies. And I think when they're properly managed, they can actually help a society heal and understand. In closing, having looked at these various discussions and also the work that we've done, the one cautionary word I would put on this is that when a society begins to confront these legacies, not to overreact and overburden the society with the past. What we found is when it's done in a moderated way, it can be effective for drawing everyone in and draw, I guess, rather than alienating, to sort of promote a sense of inclusiveness. The mayor of Nantes, for example, when he first undertook this initiative, not only the stones were there, he agreed with that, they agreed with the installation of this memorial museum, but then there was a call for changing street names, for a whole radical raft of things. And the mayor, because he'd taken the right steps, he'd taken the stakeholder engagement that was necessary, but he found a middle ground, and he said, no, this is what we're going to do, and this is enough. And I believe the general population, and not when you read in the press, when you read the reviews, when you read the debates, he really brought the community along where there's a general sense of agreement, but it doesn't mean that everyone got what they wanted. And so I think for any society, when it's taken, whether it's decades or, in the case of the French, centuries to deal with this, a moderated, careful, staged approach is one way of keeping the society together while recognizing these paths and moving forward and avoiding those scenes from American college campuses that we've seen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I don't think it's artistic panel. It's rather a panel about the forms of memory, how memory lives, how we deal with memory, sometimes how memory is managed and what it can do to us. And so I'm very interested to introduce our last panelist, Lukas Welz, who I understand, deals with healing memories. Or you will precise me more, so please.
Okay, I'll take this and take the microphone. So thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. I'm representing here an organization called Augant, which is an organization founded 30 years ago in Israel and in Germany. And I'm chairman of the German part, who is basically supporting the organization in the psychosocial help for Holocaust survivors in Israel, which are about 20,000 people that we help in psychosocial treatment every year. And the number is not declining. The contrary is right. We are now serving double the size of those that we served in psychosocial senses 10 years ago. That may come as a surprise, and I will come back to that later on. But first of all, I think one has to remember also this year is not only the year of 30 years of national reawakening in the Baltic states and other countries, but also the 75th anniversary, so to say, of the liberation of the camps and the survivors. And we in Germany also tend to celebrate that, although one has to ask oneself who was really liberated. Was it Germany? Was it the Germans? Or was it rather the survivors actually, and not the Germans who actually followed National Socialism up until the very last days? There's stories of a train, a memorial in Tröbitz in Belsen-Brandenburg. There was a train where deportees from Bergen-Belsen camp were deported in May to Terezin for extermination, 2,500 Jewish people. And so even the war was over nearly. It was the will of Germany and the Germans to murder the Jews. I will cite Giselle Zützowicz, and I will follow the artistic panel. I was not prepared for that, but we'll have a short film maybe later on, and you will see her there speaking in photographies. So Giselle Zützowicz, she was born in Chust in Ukraine, is a psychotherapist and still working until today for Augant in therapeutic sessions. And she remembers the day of liberation. She was in Auschwitz also and other camps, and she remembers the day of liberation as follows. The SS told us that we were free. We could go where we wanted and we could do what we wanted. But there was no place where we could have gone. So it was actually this moment of liberation that she was remembering as traumatizing. So that was the moment where she could feel nothing but emptiness and pain, and all these pains and sufferings became clear, and she realized what happened to her and her family. And luckily she found her mother later on and also family members, but still this was the traumatizing moment, the liberation. So this is something in most societies, and especially societies with no survivors, people can hardly imagine. And also after liberation, it took decades for her to speak about this past. Even her husband never asked her. So she lived in New York, then later migrated to Jerusalem. And that was very common in also Israel, in the Israeli society, as survivors have not been seen as heroes and martyrs as they are seen today, which is also another, I think, problematic issue, but rather as those who have been, and I quote one of the witnesses from the Icon trial in Jerusalem in 1961, they have been seen as those as sheep that went to the slaughterhouse, and of course most of them have been broken down mentally, physically, were not able to be the pioneers of the Zionist idea and vision. And so within the Holocaust survivors population, also in Israel, for decades, there was a conspiracy of silence, what is called a conspiracy of silence. So those who, the survivors who did not speak in public, did not speak in society because people did not believe what they experienced. Although these were fellow Jewish people, but they could not believe what they really lived through. And so they did not feel recognized. I think recognition is one of the most important words that we use today already, and I think it's also very important to start to how we can deal with trauma. And this was, of course, not true for the survivor population itself. So many survivors visited each other, and to quote Giselle again, on Friday evenings, many Holocaust survivors came to visit my mother because it was nice to be with a mother. There were no mothers anymore. So we have this conspiracy of silence, which is also true for the perpetrator side. I mean, in Germany, and I think this is even more the contest or the struggle that we face in Germany when we deal about the Holocaust and the NS past, National Socialist past, is that you have this conspiracy within your families, and this is also, and mainly I think, because the second and third generation is not asking their grandparents or parents, or were not asking also in the last years, what have you actually done, what was your contribution or not. And so it is not, it's clear that many, and there are high numbers in polls who say, about 30% say, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents have been in a resistance movement, or they saved Jews, or they have even been Jews. So the self-victimization of Germans is one of the big crucial issues, and I think it's not discussed so much again. And in a political way, again, you can see it up until 2 weeks ago. It took 75 years for Germany, although the past and everything is obvious, and also the victims groups have been obvious for nearly 80 years now. Only 2 weeks ago, the German Bundestag passed the recognition of social misfits as a victim group of National Socialism. It took 50 years to recognize Sinti and Roma as a victim group of National Socialism, and another 20 years to erect a monument in Germany. So it's also here that you hear the stories of survivors, you hear the stories of the victims, you have the thumbing stones, but there are no stones and no marking signs of perpetrator places where perpetrators lived, where they actually, which is actually, I think, even more important for a society to recognize that fact, instead of only asking the survivors, what was your story about, which is important, of course, but there's a misconception in that you accept or you expect somebody to know the story of his surviving grandmother. When you meet the Jewish people, for instance, many non-Jews then ask, where have your grandparents been, in which camp? And then they ask back, and what did your grandfather did in the Second World War? And then they say, I don't know actually, and I don't really care. So there's this really, it's not a equal memorialization of the past here. And I think this leads also to consequences in terms of anti-Semitism and continuity of racist and other structures within society that we can see until today, when we recall the attack on the synagogue in Halle as an extreme example. So in AMCHA was founded in '87 as an organization of Holocaust survivors themselves, who also saw we need a specific organization, a community, which I think is the second big important issue here, besides recognition, the community, where we can treat our fellow survivors in a decent way, because many of them have been treated also because of the trauma. Research was not that there, scientific research was not there so much, and they have been treated in very false ways, and also Israeli psychologists were afraid of treating survivors. And so now I want to shortly go into our concept of trauma, because I think it differs also from other conceptions today. As we heard, there's this global issue of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and we see it slightly different, because for us, those who survived Shoah are not ill in a way. They are not, it's not an illness they received. It's not an injection. It's not a virus they received in the Holocaust, but rather trauma we see as a normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. So trauma actually, to react traumatic in that way is a normal reaction. So this concept goes on with the perspective of Frans Karlsson, a Dutch psychiatrist who did research in the end of the 70s with Jewish child survivors in the Netherlands. And he made a significant contribution to psychoanalytical research and the understanding of extreme trauma across generations, because this is something that we deal with. And I'll stop in a minute. So he says it's not necessarily the severity of the trauma alone, but also to a large extent the way in which the victims are dealt with. And that has an impact on how they can deal with and process the psychological injury. So it's not about healing. So to answer to your introduction, we are not about, this organization is not about healing, but about treating the trauma and the present past. So Karlsson made clear that it's about these sequences following the initial trauma that are as important as the trauma itself, or even more important. So to make it clear with Giselle's example I quoted in the beginning, it is not about her experiences in Auschwitz alone and the violence that she survived, but rather how society, how families, how individuals, how the caring environment, the care milieu is dealing with the survivors. And so recognition is the entry point for that, but there are furthermore very important things that we think are necessary. And so we wrote down, to sum that up, we wrote down some of these points in a paper that was a German-Israeli expert exchange. And in this program called Present Past, we defined some of the principles that we see as important. So we did not want to go into detail with instruments or how to treat individuals, but rather what are the principles underlying this treatment process. And in the last year, we were able to do that with the German Ministry of Health in Ukraine to support organizations working there with refugees and Roma and Holocaust survivors. And so this, I think, is another conception of trauma and of memory, because the conspiracy of silence in Ukraine, when you see there forests where mass graves, thousands of forests and mass graves buried nearly there, and then on the other hand, small village communities very much engaged in dealing with that past, then this is really heartbreaking. And maybe if we have the time, it's a 7-minute short film.
7 minutes we have.
Okay, so this is just to give you, because we spoke about geopolitics, about memories, and I think it's important to show also those individuals who survived. And this is a short film. It will end with the work of Augant, so that you get a short insight. And especially this is what I think is important, to give them the voice who survived the Shoah here in this room. So if that works, you could start the film now.
All my family was killed. My mother was burned. My dad just went to, he was 50 years old, 49, and she was to the gas camera and then burned. And my sister was just took off from the train going, and she was killed, like a young girl, 20 years old, 21. Why? Because she is Jewish. And they killed her immediately, because she is Jewish. Over, but nobody did. They're standing there no sign of any joy after all those years of captivity. And I couldn't understand it. Really, why aren't we celebrating this event that we were waiting for 6 years? And then, 50 years later, I realized why we did not jubilate. Because they said you can go wherever you want to. And where is the place where we can go to? Where do we have a place? Can we just go home? We don't know where we'll be. A total homelessness with not even an atomic size of possibility for us to settle down and just sit in our homes. No prospect of any possibility to make a future. When I came to Israel, I was 10. And I said, no, I don't want this Polish name, I want to be Israeli girl, and I don't want anybody will ask me, where are you from? People who were here couldn't believe what happened in Europe, what happened to all the Jews and all their families and so on. So I didn't want to be the girl from Poland. I decided when I grew up that my children will have beautiful childhood. And when you are born, I thought I will give him most wonderful childhood I can. And he was a really happy child. And I started going to school when I was 40 years old, when I had 3 children. My oldest was 11 years old. And it wasn't easy, because I never gave up on the children's standards. When they all went to sleep, including my husband, I put out on the kitchen table my books, and I was doing it. It was very hard. But it was so pleasure. It was, for me, sheer pleasure to study. We came home, and I couldn't sleep. I was sitting here, and I cried like something will happen to me. Nothing happened. I was so scared. I felt like my hair was standing like that. Max went to work at the morning, the children to school, and I was here by myself. I was afraid to be at home. I am crying without any reason. It's impossible. And the was coming to me, Ima, why are you crying? And I said to him, I don't know. I felt so frightened and so alone and so like I was 2 years old.
I'm a laughable person. I'm full with life. And my parents couldn't accept that I'm such a happy girl. I think my mother hated me for that. All the time I was happy. I was singing and laughing and jumping. And she couldn't stand it, because life were gray and black. And I brought a little bit reddish, a little bit bluish, and she couldn't accept it.
My son is a psychiatrist, and he knew about Amcha. Then I had in a booth, I had an accident, and I was in a terrible condition, terrible. I was sick physically and mentally and everything. And he told me, you are going to Amcha. They will help you. It was 7, 8 years ago. And I went to Amcha. And I asked for psychological treatment and somebody, and he helped me. I came to help. I helped me a lot. Many people, it is their second home, Amcha. Twice a week I must go. and it helps me, and they are really helping people. And when all the people are together, they are playing cards, and they are talking, and they are dancing, and they are singing. I began to love them. They were so nice to me. I really came to life again.
So thank you very much for actually for disclosure that maybe a bit in artistic way, but actually says there's life after memories. And here I wouldn't like to draw any conclusions, but we have some little time and we're able to open floor for questions among panel and outside of the panel. There's some hands up, so please, please. So we can. If you could introduce
yes,
yourself.
Yes, of course. My name is Konstantin Eget. I'm a Deutsche Welle journalist living here, but I was born in Moscow. And I have two questions, one to Svetlana Alexievich and another one to Mr. Rybak. And I'll translate myself my question to Svetlana Alexandrovna. Svetlana Alexandrovna, я бы хотел спросить о том, что касается нынешней ситуации в России, где государство, Кремль очень активно занимается политикой памяти, прямо скажем. Ваша оценка и гражданина, и писателя, насколько успешным будет эта новая попытка дать когда-то еще совсем недавно новой России новую старую историю? Сколь долго это будет держаться? Потому что есть два взгляда на этот счет. Да, одни говорят, что русским на все наплевать, и завтра уйдет Путин, это все тоже уйдет. А другие говорят, что это может остаться годами, десятилетиями, как остается до сих пор Сталин. Что вы думаете об этом? So my question is to Ms. Alexievich about the role of the Russian state now in terms of politics of memory. Mr. Putin is trying to give Russia a new old history, which basically unites everything that was before 1917 with everything that was after 1917 in one narrative of good. Do you think it will be effective, especially when Mr. Putin goes? And my question to Mr. Rybak is also about the role of the state, but in a different context. Among some of the photos you had in the beginning, and the title of your presentation was the Valle de los Caídos near Madrid, where very dramatic events happened very recently with Generalissimo Franco being exhumated by the government. My question is actually also about the role of the state, because now the new leftist government in Spain is discussing the possibility of banning any discussion of the civil war in Spain in public sphere. So how does the state and even the do-gooders in the politics of memory business, how do they impact free speech? Isn't it more important than maybe even preserving some feelings? Thank you.
Я хочу сказать, что будущее, которое уже нельзя прогнозировать, но в России вообще иначе все сложно. Не только сложные отношения с будущим, но сложные отношения с прошлым. Его нельзя предсказать так же, как и будущее. С одной стороны, обществу навязывается идея и истории, которой как бы не было, но государство хочет создать некую государственную идеологию, где проглядывают и неумерший имперскость, и неумерший коммунизм, а с другой стороны ничего не поговорили. Ни о чем нельзя сказать правду. Не Великой Отечественной. Там чуть ли не депутаты хотели в Госдуме придумать уголовную статью. Если будет...
Громче надо говорить, микрофон себя держит.
Да, если будет какой-то другой взгляд на войну, чем та, которая еще Сталин, как бы, его идеи. Нельзя говорить не о лагере, в общем-то. Мы знаем, вот я только перед отъездом подписывала письмо в защиту Дмитриева, который, в общем-то, раскопал огромные лагеря в Сандермахе, в таком месте. И сейчас он в тюрьме по каким-то ложным обвинениям, и уже это тянется история лет 5. И не проговорено ни одно, ни коммунизм не проговорит, что это было. Вы понимаете, все недавние травмы, которые были, ни одна из них не проговорена в обществе. А мало того, парализована как бы элита. Тут даже нельзя понять, почему она парализована. С одной стороны, конечно, есть система страха, но этот страх какого-то такого непонятного порядка. Если при Сталине за то, что ты говорил правду, ты мог оказаться в лагере, то сейчас, как мне говорил очень известный человек, театральный деятель, когда я сказал, ну почему вы молчите, почему вы не можете сказать правду среди того, что происходит сегодня в России. И вдруг он сказал, а у меня заберут театр. Потом выясняется, а у сына ресторанчик. Вы знаете, это какие-то такие совершенно новые ответы для русской интеллигенции. У нее, начиная, я не знаю, еще со времен Ивана Грозного, были совсем другие отношения в государстве. Все-таки люди рисковали, люди говорили, и рисковали не тем, что они потеряют какие-то деньги или статусы, они могли потерять жизнь, и они ее теряли, но они это делали. Сегодня вот эта парализованность элиты, это отсутствие нового осмысления, вот то, что когда-то называлось «работали в стол» или «подпольный самиздат», это все куда-то исчезло, и я даже не знаю сказать, чем это элита, чем она это заменила для самостояния, для самосохранения. Ведь если ты в чем-то не участвуешь, ты, конечно, у тебя есть внешний ответ, но у тебя должен быть внутренний ответ. Когда ты же остаешься один на один, и ты говоришь, почему ты этого не делаешь. Я не знаю, как с этим справляются мои коллеги, те, кого можно назвать элитой, интеллектуалы, все находят какие-то интересы такого научного порядка или еще что-то, а слишком мало людей, которые рискуют. Вот недавно умер руководитель мемориала Рогинский. Это оказалось такой зияющей пропастью для всей этой огромной России, что ее до сих пор никто не может закрыть. Потому что это был человек, который действительно генерировал идеи вот этого осмысления. Действительно, не сдавался, не сдавал себя, скажем так. Не то чтобы он не сдавал самого себя. То, что, к сожалению, произошло вот у нас сейчас. И идет наступление тех сил, которые еще недавно были совершенно маргинальными. Вот этот Дугин, там философ, еще какие-то. Еще 15 лет назад нельзя было представить себе, что кто-то серьезно относится к этим идеям.
великой России, ну, великой в смысле имперскости. Там опять эти идеи чуть ли не Третьего Рима и еще что-то. Даже серьезно об этом говорить невозможно. Но вдруг эти государственные деятели этих людей цитируют или достают из прошлого философов, которые вот эти же идеи проповедовали. То есть Россия, оказавшись вот в этом промежуточное время, тут можно процитировать только Шаламова, писателя Шаламова, наверняка многие из вас его знают, который 20 лет просидел в сталинских лагерях и пришел и написал об этом лучшие книги, по-моему, о ГУЛАГе. Когда он говорил, что лагерь развращает и палача и жертву. Мы можем сказать, то состояние умов, в котором сегодня находится Россия, и власть, и само общество, связано с тем, что вот то, что было советским временем, оно развратило и элиту, и общество. То есть нет традиции вот такого силы противостояния, которое было в прежние времена, когда был Короленко, Герцен. То есть вот этого сейчас нет. И мы оказались в таком состоянии, когда никто не говорит о главных вещах, о которых надо говорить в обществе. В результате общества как бы нет. Есть люди с деньгами, люди без денег. Я это говорю как художник, как я вижу, вот исходя из своих, и из того, что я пишу, из того, что я езжу по этой огромной бывшей стране и разговариваю с людьми. Они, потеряв вот эту идеологию сильную, они пытаются ее заменить религией. И сами люди, и государство. Это нельзя сказать, что только вот это, ну как бы, Путин делает там музей Сталина, говорит, делать бюст Сталина, который опять усеивает эту Россию. Вовсе нет, это делает сам народ. То есть это какое-то произошло вот такое движение, и даже можно сказать, что было время, что когда Путин пришел к власти, он в общем-то, слушал Россию, мне так кажется, и не смог быть там Вацлавом Гавелом, который бы вытащил Россию из этой темного какой-то темноты сознания, неосмысления. А он, наоборот, пошел навстречу вот тому, что есть в народе, и потому что народ, это так, журналисты представляют, и я, когда начала ездить по России, тоже себе так это представляла, что да, произошла в 90-е годы революция, и вот мы ее ждали. Это я ждала, ждали мои демократические друзья. Я начинаю говорить с людьми, да никто этого не ждал, это все для них было полной неожиданностью. И тем более никто не ждал никакого капитализма. Все хотели социализма с человеческим лицом. К капитализму совершенно никто не был готов. И до сих пор, собственно, существует несогласие России с капитализмом. То есть народ с ним не согласен. И это рождает еще какие-то разрывы в обществе. Так что все, что нас навязывает государственная идеология, я соглашусь с теми людьми, которые говорили вам, что это временно. Уйдет сегодняшняя власть, и будет какая-то совершенно другая Россия. Выйдут какие-то совершенно другие силы. Смогут ли они выстоять, неизвестно. То есть вот я и мои друзья очень много все читают книги о времени перед революцией, о времени перед Гитлером. То есть все находятся в каком-то таком междуумии, что ли сказать. Все не знают ответов. Да, и, конечно, когда все занимаются прошлым, не находя в нем сегодняшних ответов, а просто как бы благодаря прошлое, благодаря жертве. Но никто не знает, а во имя чего мы спускались в ад. Вот для меня, например, лично, я 30 лет писала свою эту историю коммунизма русского, энциклопедию коммунизма. Для меня был главный два вопроса. Зачем я спускалась в ад? Что оттуда удалось вытащить? И второе, почему наши страдания не конвертируются в свободу? И должна вам признаться в своем поражении, я не нашла ответа на эти вопросы. Потому что ты заходишь в дом, в любой дом зайди, и ты сталкиваешься с болью, от которой ты приходишь в гостиницу и не можешь прийти в себя, и ты встречаешься с этой высокой вот болью и с рабством. И это в таком синтезе, что это ты не знаешь, как одно делить от другого. Ты не знаешь, как объяснить вот это такое, почему такие сиамские близнецы, почему это нельзя разорвать, почему сам человек не стремится это сделать. Вы понимаете, вот это, я даже не могла бы сказать, что это травма. Я могла бы сказать, что вот русское общество сегодня больное общество. Люди растеряны, люди обозлены. И, в общем-то, если мы думали, и люди когда-то в тюрьму садили за книги там, того же Шаламова, Солженицына, сейчас вот лежит горой и никого не интересует. То есть где-то вверху, вот я вот сейчас слушаю доклады, люди делают свою работу, как кроты, истории. Там надо действительно делать спокойно свою работу. Но мы как бы оказываемся в какой-то тусовке, как бы мы друг с другом. А вот проникнуть в эту народную толщу невозможно. А вот загадка, Путин проник. Только сказал, Россию унижают, мы окружены врагами. И ты оказываешься в Москве, и вдруг видишь магазин, это мое недавнее потрясение, магазин военной детской одежды. Я захожу в этот магазин, начиная с 4 лет. Вы можете одеть ребенка в военную одежду. И я спрашиваю продавцов, эти женщины вполне думают, что они нормальным товаром торгуют, что это нормально. В детских садах утренники, дети одеты в военную форму. Вы понимаете, что творится вот в обществе? А в другом, вот в Ярославле я недавно была, вот, значит, в одном месте эти утренники военные, а в другом месте какие-то религиозные всякие общества. Хорошо, если они, там есть продвинутые такие священники, и они пытаются говорить о каких-то серьезных вещах. А то все тоже, а то совершенно другое, в основном совершенно другое. Вот это усиливается чувство рабства. Да, я раб Божий, вот даст, вот Бог спасет Россию. Вот, вы знаете, я уже не могла, когда писала «Время СКНК», я уже не могла слышать эти причитания. И спрашиваешь человека, а где ты? А тебе на полном серьезе женщина, после того, как рассказала мне потрясающую историю, как она была на войне, и что она, как она перенесла, и один из лучших ее рассказов. И сидит и говорит, надо пойти к своему батюшке и спросить, могу я заводить собачку или нет? Я говорю, ну это как бы Богу других дел полно, вы могли сами решить насчет собачки. Да? Вот. Вы понимаете? И вот это сочетается, вот эта величина боли, и вот с этим, что кто-то должен тебе сказать, нужна ли тебе собачка или нет. Или заводить или нет. Нужна, так еще врач может сказать. Да? Так что мне трудно ответить на ваш вопрос. Я вот после 30 лет осталась в большом шоке, это было бы так, моя внучка так может выражаться, да, но в большом недоумении перед массой вопросов, перед которыми мы оказались. Откуда они? Вроде бы понятно, из этой темноты нашего прошлого. Но почему мы так медленно движемся куда-то? И почему мне всегда казалось, что боль дает, ну мы все познаем через боль, такова форма познания в русской истории, да? Но почему, познавая через боль, мы все время вот крутимся в этом проклятом круге, не пытаясь никуда вырваться? Вот почему я сейчас хочу написать две книги о другом. Одна книга о любви, а вторая о темноте, когда человек уже о старости, о темноте, когда он уходит в никуда уже, да? Ну куда-то, куда мы не знаем. Меня интересует все-таки экзистенциально. Вот когда посадить человека на этот пятачок экзистенциальности и заставить его, ну, заставить своих вот людей, с кем я буду разговаривать, заставить все-таки ответить на какие-то вопросы, когда уже ни за идеи не спрячешься, ни за государство не спрячешься, потому что все видят, что не понимают, что это такое сегодня, чтобы они на что-то ответили. Да.
There was a second question, so yeah, please.
I'll be brief. I understood the question. It wasn't really a question, it was a provocation. And as an American who grew up with the First Amendment, it's a question of free speech versus social good in a way. And should we be silent on some things for the social good and compromise our First Amendment rights? I guess my answer to that would be that when you're talking about historic wounds, we're talking about healing processes, and every wound is different, or there are many different types of wounds, and they heal at different places, at different times, at different rates, and some are deeper and some less so. There's a term that we keep coming across in our work, which is mnemonic security, which just means the security of a historic memory. And when we were talking about an East European country, a post-Soviet period, someone said, you know, when your borders are insecure, when your economy is insecure, when your political situation is unstable, sometimes all you have is a historic memory. And so you need to to keep the nation together around the one thing that you can control, which is a historic narrative. And once these other issues become more secure, you're able to move forward and to look at your histories, at your narratives in a more differentiated way. You mentioned Spain in particular, and there I think everyone knows just briefly, after Franco died, there was something called the Pact of Silence, where the country just decided that they had to be silent on the horrors and first of all, of the Civil War, but then also on the Franco regime, because the country simply would have gone back into another civil war or would have simply fractured and broken apart. In recent years, they've begun to confront this, and there's a more open dialogue on this, and a lot of the pain is coming out. Well, Spain has reached a point where it can begin confronting these. The big challenge was there was this enormous memorial that Franco built to himself, and he was interred there. They just made a decision under a new government to move it out, which had a lot of complications. In any event, I do think Spain's an example of that, conspiracy of silence. You talked about this conspiracy of silence among Holocaust survivors, and society needed time to move forward with that. The United States, our narrative about the American Civil War was a war between the states. It was about states' rights and independence for 100 years. It was not until the Civil Rights Movement that we started looking at the issue of slavery. Now, that's the dominant narrative in America, and suddenly these statues that have been there for 100 years have suddenly become controversial. So I think narratives change with time, and in some ways, we build the history for the period that we need. And one closing remark here, just as I was thinking about the situation in Lithuania, the title of this conference is The Undigested Past. What I'm hearing in subtext is, has Lithuania done enough to confront the Holocaust? Should it be doing more? Where is Lithuania with this? Well, is it possible that you've spent the last 20 years digesting the legacies of the Soviet past, that possibly this meal is digested enough that you can begin looking at another historical legacy that now needs to be digested, and that the confrontation with the Holocaust now can actually be seen as, I don't know if you call it a success, but simply a next phase, a next step in a country, in an ongoing process of a historical narrative.
So we had rather long, 2 questions and long answer. So last question, in hoping for very short answer. Please.
My name is Andrius Kulikauskas. I organize Lithuanians to have empathy for Lithuania's Jews. President Adamkus spoke, but he has never spoken about his godfather, Voldemaras. The Voldemarist faction was a genocidal faction. It accelerated the Holocaust. He was a teenager during the Holocaust, so he knew lots of Voldemaras. He has lots of wealth to share. Now, if that was his private trauma, then that's his private matter. But this is, we're talking about national trauma, public figures. How do we love our public figures so that they would, if he spoke up about, so I'll give an example. Greimas was the greatest, some would say, Lithuanian
Sorry,
intellectual.
it's your question or your intervention?
No. So my question is, how do we love someone like that so that they would share their public testimony? I was going to say, I was able to do that with Jonas Mekas. As a teenager, after the Holocaust in his town, a month later, he joined the newspaper which had urged ethnic cleansing. And I was able to ask him, because Greimas had done something worse, I was able to ask him, why did you do this? And he said, we had a discussion. He ended up giving a 6-hour interview for the Holocaust Museum. Now, will Adamkus president die before he gives that interview, or will he give that interview sometime this year? That's my question. How do we love him so he will?
Who are you asking? President Adamkus is not.
Dr.
President Adamkus is not here.
Dr. Ryback gave a very nice example of how to love, how that type of love works, how to make people feel secure, so that they help us before they die.
Okay, so that's the question to the air, because President Adamkus is not here, he cannot hear you. I think, at this point, let's close this. It's here, we see memories and also questions coming out. But I don't think we should comment on this situation, on your question. Thank you very much. So I think panel and panelists, conference is thought-provoking. And I could comment myself, the fact that Voldemaras was at the presence of Adamkus, nothing shows actually that they were close in any way.
Well, his best friend Benedictus Machuika, his
okay, but here we already have different story. Thank you very much.
Yes, these are people like Jonas Piragius. What did he know about Jonas Piragius? What did he know about?
President Adamkus is
so, for
public
example,
person.
Benedictus Machuika's little brother.
Sorry, you interrupted me. You can contact President Adamkus through his office.
That's why I could contact Jonas Mekas, and I did, and you did not. Now, you could contact Voldemar, because you sit here. Herkos Končius is the leader of PEN in Lithuania. I told him I'm an enemy of the state. Could you help me? He said, I don't care about your talk.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Here we have the situation of the